What was the first mammal to be successfully cloned?
The first mammal cloned from adult cells was Dolly. A.U. born in July 1996. Dolly was born in a research facility in Scotland. Ian Wilmut, 1944, led the team of biologists that removed a nucleus from a mammary cell of an adult ewe and transplanted it into an enucleated egg extracted from a second ewe. Electrical pulses were administered to fuse the nucleus with its new host. When the egg began to divide and develop into an embryo, it was transplanted into a surrogate mother ewe. Dolly was the genetic twin of the ewe that donated the mammary cell nucleus. On April 13, 1998, Dolly gave birth to Bonnie, the product of a normal mating between Dolly and a Welsh mountain ram. This event demonstrates that Dolly was a healthy, fertile sheep, able to produce healthy offspring.
Why do some animals hunt only at night?
In the arms race between predator and prey, a change in the behavior of one species can drive adaptation in another, coevolution. Many rodent species, for example, are adapted to life at night. But their predators have gained adaptations to night work as well. Owls and foxes have special adaptations that allow them to hunt at night for nocturnally active rodents, example field mice, moles, voles.
When was the term physiology first used?
The term physiology was first used by the Greeks as early as 600 B. CE to describe a philosophical inquiry into the nature of things. It was not until the 16th century that the term was used in reference to vital activities of healthy humans. During the 19th century its usage was expanded to include the study of all living organisms using chemical, physical, and anatomical experimental methods.
Do all plant cells contain chloroplasts?
No, not all plant cells contain chloroplasts. The various types of plant cells arise from meristem, rapidly dividing and undifferentiated tissue. Meristem cells do not contain chloroplasts, but have smaller organelles called proplastids. Depending on their location in a plant and how much light they receive, proplastids develop into one of several kinds of plastids with different functions. Chloroplasts are one example of a plastid that converts light energy to chemical energy, subsequently used in synthesizing organic molecules, the process of photosynthesis.
What is Darwinian fitness?
Darwinian fitness is measured as the average representation of one allele or genotype. In the next generation of a population as compared to other alleles or genotypes. In other words, those alleles or genotypes that become more common within the population are more fit.
Do animal societies have a culture?
Culture can be defined as the set of societal rules that are passed from one generation to the next. Parents or caregivers teach juveniles what they need to know in order to participate in their society. This phenomenon has been noted among non-human primates and elephants as well as other species. Elephant families rely on memory and the knowledge of the matriarch. Oldest female, to respond to social cues. The matriarch controls the direction in which the herd moves, and where and for how long feeding occurs. When there is danger, the other herd members cluster around the matriarch. Perhaps most striking is the tender loving care lavished on young elephants. The bond between mother and daughter elephants lasts up to 50 years.
What is the function of the endocrine system?
The endocrine system is the main chemical regulating system of an organism. Hormones, chemicals made and secreted by endocrine glands or neurosecretory cells, are the main messengers of the endocrine system. Hormones are transported in the blood to all parts of the body and interact with target cells. Cells that contain hormone receptors, and they regulate metabolic rate, growth, maturation, and reproduction.
What are the steps of food processing for animals?
The first step is for animals to ingest food. The food is then broken down via the digestive process into molecules that the organism can absorb for energy. Once the food is digested, it is absorbed through the digestive tract to provide energy for the organism. The final step of food processing is elimination. During elimination, undigested material is passed out of the digestive tract.
Why are horsetails called scouring rushes?
The epidermal tissue of horsetails contains abrasive particles of silica. Scouring rushes were used by Native Americans to polish bows and arrows. Early North American settlers, who cleaned their pots and pans along stream banks, used horsetails found in abundance in such areas to scrub out their dishes.
What is the ENCODE project?
The ENCODE, Encyclopedia of DNA Elements, project refers to a long-term project sponsored by the National Human Genome Research Institute to identify and locate all genes, including protein coding and non-protein coding ones, and other functional elements within the human genome.
What are the agricultural uses of antibiotics?
Antibiotics are sprayed onto fruit trees and other food-bearing plants to control disease. In addition, antibiotics are added to feedstocks to prevent disease and improve the growth rate among food-producing animals.
What is photosynthesis?
Photosynthesis, from the Greek word photo, meaning light, and synthesis, from the Greek word syntythene, which means to put together, is the process by which plants use energy derived from light in order to make food molecules from carbon dioxide and water. Photosynthesis is a dual-staged process with multiple components. Light reactions or light-dependent reactions compose the first steps of photosynthesis. During the light reactions, light energy derived from sunlight is converted to chemical energy. Oxygen, O2, is produced as a waste product of this process. The steps of the second stage are the carbon fixation reactions known as the Calvin cycle. The Calvin cycle is a series of reactions that assemble sugar molecules from carbon dioxide, CO2, and the energy-containing products of the light reactions. Carbon fixation is the conversion of carbon dioxide, CO2, into organic compounds.
What is the founder effect?
When a small group of individuals forms the genetic basis for a new population, only the variations within that founding group will be found in the resultant population. This is known as the founder effect. An example of the founder effect is found among the finches of the Galapagos Islands.
How do diet drugs affect cell metabolism?
Diet drugs target the areas of the brain that control food intake and produce neurotransmitters. Drugs that attempt to control food intake are adrenergic. Their role is to enhance metabolism and increase the efficiency of calorie burning. The second type of drug targets the brain chemical serotonin. Serotonin is linked to appetite, particularly cravings for carbohydrates. Higher levels of serotonin lead to less cravings for carbohydrates. For example, the diet drug dexvenfluramine inhibits the removal of serotonin in the brain. However, there are side effects to the use of diet drugs, and there is insufficient data regarding the safety and effectiveness of their long-term use.
What are the major groups of segmented worms?
Members of the phylum Annelida, the segmented worms, have bilateral symmetry and a tubular body that may have 100 to 175 ring-like segments. The three classes of segmented worms are, 1. Polychaeta, the sandworms and tube worms. 2. Oligochaeta, the earthworms, and 3. Hirudinea, the leeches.
How many kinds of mushrooms are edible?
Among the basidiomycetes, there are approximately 200 varieties of edible mushrooms and about 70 species of poisonous ones. Some edible mushrooms are cultivated commercially, more than 844 million pounds. 382,832 metric tons, are produced in the United States each year.
What is the difference between altricial and precocial offspring?
Altricial and precocial are terms used to describe the development of young birds at hatching. Hatchlings that are able to find and consume their own food and have at least minimal anti-predator defenses are described as precocial. Offspring requiring extensive parental care, like humans, are altricial. Examples of precocial non-mammalian species include chickens and the young of game birds. Examples of altricial non-mammalian species include songbirds, woodpeckers, and hummingbirds.
What are the steps of the gram stain?
Crystal violet, a primary stain, one that imparts its color to all cells, is applied to a heat-fixed smear. After a short time the crystal violet is washed off, and the smear is covered with iodine, a mordant. When the iodine is washed off, the bacteria appear dark violet or purple. The slide is then washed in an alcohol or alcohol acetone solution. This decolorizing agent removes the purple from the cell of some species but not from others. The alcohol is rinsed off, and the slide is then stained with safranine, a basic red dye. The smear is then washed again, blotted dry, and examined under a microscope. Gram-positive bacteria retain the purple dye, while those that lose the purple color are classified as gram-negative.
What is a gene patent?
A gene patent is a patent issued for a specific DNA sequence of a specific organism. It is common for companies to obtain patents for genes important to medicine and agriculture.
What is a redox reaction?
A redox reaction is actually a series of chemical reactions involving the transfer of electrons from one atom or molecule to another. By transferring electrons, the cell is also transferring energy. The molecule that loses an electron is said to be oxidized, resulting in its charge becoming positive. The molecule that gains an electron is said to be reduced, and its charge becomes negative. Electrons do not travel alone in cells, rather, they are accompanied by a proton, H+. A proton and an electron together make a hydrogen atom. Ultimately, a redox reaction involves the loss of hydrogen atoms from one molecule and the gain of hydrogen atoms by another molecule.
From where do frankincense and myrrh originate?
Frankincense is an aromatic gum resin obtained by tapping the trunks of trees belonging to the genus Boswellia. The milky resin hardens when exposed to the air, forming irregularly shaped granules, the form in which frankincense is usually marketed and sold. Also called olibanum, frankincense is used as an ingredient in many different products, including pharmaceuticals, perfumes, fixatives, fumigants, and incense. Myrrh comes from a tree of the genus Commiphora, native to the northeastern region of Africa and the Middle East. Myrrh is also a resin obtained from trees. It is used in pharmaceuticals, perfumes, and toothpastes.
How do muscle cells use calcium?
Calcium ions are stored inside muscle cells. The calcium ions are released when a muscle cell gets a signal to induce contraction, which initiates the movement of the contractile proteins within muscles. When calcium concentrations fall, muscle contractions stop.
What is polyploidy?
Polyploidy is a condition where complete, extra sets of chromosomes are contained within cells. Polyploid individuals are described as being 3N, triploid, 4N, tetraploid, and so on. Humans cannot survive as polyploids and rarely as aneuploids.
How fast does a hummingbird fly, and how far does the hummingbird migrate?
Hummingbirds fly at speeds up to 71 miles per hour, 114 kilometers per hour. Small species beat their wings 50 to 80 times per second, higher in courtship displays. For comparison, the following table lists the flight speeds of some other birds. The longest migratory flight of a hummingbird documented to date is the flight of a rufous hummingbird from Ramsey Canyon, Arizona, to near Mt. St. Helens, Washington, a distance of 1,414 miles 2,277 kilometers. Bird banding studies are now in progress to verify that a few rufous hummingbirds do make a 11,000 to 11,500 miles, 17,699 to 18,503 kilometers. Journey along a super Great Basin high route, a circuit that could take a year to complete. Hummingbird studies, however, are difficult to complete because so few banded birds are recovered.
What is a knockout mouse?
A knockout mouse is a mouse that has specific genes mutated, knocked out, so that the lack of production of the gene product can be studied in an animal model. Knockout mice are frequently used in pharmaceutical studies to test the potential for a particular human enzyme as a therapy target. Mice have identical or nearly identical copies of human proteins, making them useful in studies that model effects in humans.
What is an intron?
An intron is the part of the RNA transcript that is removed by the spliceosome and therefore remains in the nucleus.
What is the major function of the nucleus?
The nucleus is the information center for the cell and the storehouse of the genetic information. DNA, that directs all of the activities of a living eukaryotic cell. It is usually the largest organelle in a eukaryotic cell and contains the chromosomes.
How do genes control cancer cells?
In normal cells, there are two types of genes that are important in determining whether or not cancerous tissue can form. These genes control the production of proteins that affect the cell cycle. Proto-oncogenes are DNA sequences that promote normal cell division. By mutation, these genes may be converted into oncogenes, which promote the overproduction of cells. Another class of genes, known as tumor suppressor genes, prevents excess reproduction of cells. Mutation in these genes can also allow cells to become cancerous.
What are nucleic acids?
DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, and RNA, ribonucleic acid, are nucleic acids. Nucleic acids are molecules comprised of monomers known as nucleotides. These molecules may be relatively small, as in the case of certain kinds of RNA, or quite large. A single DNA strand may have millions of monomer units. Individual nucleotides and their derivatives are important in living organisms. ATP. The molecule that transfers energy in cells, is built from a nucleotide, as are a number of other molecules crucial to metabolism.
The estimated number of species identified per phyla as of the early 21st century is as follows. Where are amoebas found?
Amoebas are found in soil, fresh water, and salt water. They have no definite body shape and continually change form. The term amoeba is derived from the Greek word meaning change, as they move using their pseudopods. Pseudopods, meaning false feet, are projections of cytoplasm. As the cytoplasm extends and fills, the amoeba are moved. The pseudopods also surround and capture food in a vacuole.
What are the main features of bryophytes?
Bryophytes are generally small, compact plants that rarely grow to more than 8 in 20 centimeters tall. They have parts that appear leaf-like, stem-like, and root-like, and lack vascular tissue, xylem and phloem. Most species have rhizoids, a cuticle, a cellular jacket to retain moisture around. Sperm-producing and egg-producing structures, and large gametophytes that hold onto sporophytes. They require water to reproduce sexually. In nature, they are noted for their intense shades of green.
How is maple syrup harvested?
Maple syrup is harvested from the trunks of sugar maple trees, Acer sacc harum. Production of maple syrup requires daily temperatures to fluctuate between freezing and thawing. During cold nights, below freezing. Starch made during the previous summer and stored in wood is converted to sugar. During the day when temperatures rise above freezing, a positive pressure is created in the xylem sapwood. When tubes called spiles are driven into the sapwood, the positive pressure pushes the sugary sap out of the tree trunk at a rate of 100 to 400 drops per minute. The flow stops when temperatures drop below freezing.
How many human RNA genes are there?
There are about 250 genes that code for short RNA sequences instead of protein. These RNA strands appear to regulate the activity of other genes, particularly those involved in embryonic development.
What are succulents?
A group of more than 30 plant families including the amaryllis, lily, and cactus families 182 form what is known as the succulents, from the Latin term succulentus, meaning fleshy or juicy. Most members of the group are resistant to droughts as they are dry weather plants. Even when they live in moist, rainy environments, these plants need very little water.
How does meiosis relate to Mendel's laws?
Mendel's law of segregation directly refers to meiosis. He had suggested that gametes contain characters that control specific traits. And these characters separate when gametes form. Gametes are formed by meiosis, in which the chromosome number is reduced by 1/2, from diploid to haploid.
How does a bulb differ from a corm, a tuber, and a rhizome?
Each of these structures is a modified stem that grows below ground. Many times the term bulb is applied to any underground storage organ in which a plant stores energy for its dormant period. Dormancy is a device a plant utilizes to get through difficult weather conditions. Winter cold or summer drought. A true bulb consists of fleshy scales containing a small basal plate. A modified stem from which the roots emerge, and a shoot. The scales that surround the embryo are modified leaves that contain the nutrients for the bulb during dormancy and early growth. Some bulbs have a tunic, a paper-thin covering, around the scales. The basal plate can also hold the scales together. New bulbs form from the lateral buds on the basal plate. Tulips, daffodils, lilies, and hyacinths are examples of bulb flowers. A corm is actually a stem that has been modified into a mass of storage tissue. The eye or eyes at the top of the corm are growing points. The corm is covered by dry leaf bases similar to the tunic covering of the bulb. Roots grow from the basal plate on the underside of the corm. New corms form on top of or beside the old one. Corm-type flowers include gladiolus, freesia, and crocus. A tuber is a solid underground mass of stem like a corm, but it lacks both a basal plate and a tunic. Roots and shoots grow from eyes, growth buds, out of its sides, bottom, and sometimes its top. Some tubers are roundish. Others are flattened and lumpy. Some examples of tubers are gloxinia, caladium, ranunculuses, and anemone. A tuberous root is a swollen root that has taken in moisture and nutrients. It resembles a tuber. New growth occurs on the base of the old stem, where it joins the root. A tuberous root can be divided by cutting off a section with an eye-bearing portion from where the old stem was attached. Dahlias have tuberous roots. A rhizome or a rootstock is a thickened, branching storage stem that usually grows laterally along or slightly below the soil surface. Roots develop downward on the bottom surface. while buds and leaves sprout upwards from the top of the rhizome. A rhizome is propagated by cutting the parent plant into sections. Japanese, Siberian, and bearded irises, cannas, calla lilies, and trilliums are rhizomes.
Why don't all types of cancers respond the same way to anti-cancer drugs?
The purpose of most anti-cancer drugs is to target the overproduction of malignant cells. Different types of cancers arise from different types of tissue. Since every tissue is made up of cells specialized for a certain function, it is not surprising that different forms of cancers will have different responses to the same drug. For example, a drug that targets the overproduction of liver cells, which are adapted to filtering and monitoring the blood supply, might have little effect on nerve cells that specialize in carrying messages.
What is estivation?
Estivation, from the Latin term estes, meaning summer, is a process by which animals become dormant during the summer rather than the winter. Estivation may be used as a survival strategy against intense heat. Ground squirrels, drought, snails, or both. The Colombian ground squirrel both hibernates and estivates, beginning its dormant period in the late summer and continuing it until the next May.
What is the significance of bee dancing? How is it that within a short time of a bee finding a food source, a great number of fellow bees will converge to gather pollen and nectar?
Communication about the food location occurs through the bee dance. This symbolic language of bees, also known as the waggle dance, is the most complex of all non-human communication systems. By placing sources of food at varying distances and angles from the hives, Carl von Frisch found that forager bees perform either a round dance for food at short distances, 66 to 656 feet or 20 to 200 m, or a waggle dance for food at longer distances. While dancing, the forager also emits sound bursts. The specifics of the dance. Example area the dance occupies on the comb, duration of each cycle, and length of sound bursts, indicate the distance and direction to the food source.
How does the dentition of animals reflect their diet?
Herbivores have sharp incisors to bite off blades of grass and other plant matter. They also have a system of flat premolars and molars for grinding and crushing grasses and plant matter. Carnivores have pointed incisors and enlarged canine teeth to tear off pieces of meat. Their premolars and molars are jagged to aid in chewing flesh. Omnivores have non-specialized teeth to accommodate a diet of both plant material and animals.
What is the Benedict's test for reducing sugars?
A commonly used test to detect carbohydrates is the Benedict's test for reducing sugars such as glucose and fructose. Benedict's reagent, containing sodium bicarbonate, sodium citrate, and copper sulfate, is added to a solution and heated. The Benedict's test identifies reducing sugars based on their ability to reduce the cupric ions to cuprous oxide at high pH values, basic solutions. Cuprous oxide is green to reddish-orange. A green solution indicates a small amount of reducing sugars, while a reddish-orange solution indicates an abundance of reducing sugars. If the solution contains sucrose, a non-reducing sugar, there is no change in color in the solution, and it remains blue.
What is biofarming?
Biofarming is a relatively new technology in which transgenic plants are used to grow pharmaceuticals. In this technique, scientists bioengineer medically important proteins into a corn plant, thus spurring the corn plant to produce large amounts of a particular medicinal protein. This is less expensive than using a microbial fermentation chamber.
When was the term homeostasis first used?
Walter Bradford Cannon, 1871–1945, who elaborated on Claude Bernard's concept of the milieu intérieur, used the term homeostasis to describe the body's ability to maintain a relative constancy in its internal environment.
What is meant by the term polar molecule?
Polar molecules have opposite charges at either end. Polar refers to the positive and negative sides of the molecule. If a molecule is polar, it will be attracted to other polar molecules. This can affect a wide range of chemical interactions, including whether a substance will dissolve in water, the shape of a protein, and the complex helical structure of DNA. Water is an example of a polar molecule.
How is yeast utilized in food and beverage manufacturing?
Yeast is used in winemaking, beer making, and bread making. Yeast converts food into alcohol and carbon dioxide, CO2, during fermentation. In the manufacture of wine and beer, the yeast's manufacture of alcohol is a desired and necessary component of the final product. The CO2 is what gives beer and champagne their bubbly effect. Bread making requires the CO2 produced by yeast for certain doughs to rise. Yeasts used in brewing and baking are cultivated strains carefully kept to prevent contamination.
How can organisms with just one set of chromosomes reproduce?
An organism that is haploid, one set of chromosomes, can reproduce by mitosis to produce more haploid cells or a multicellular haploid organism. This is typical of some algae and fungi.
How can a given trait have more than 2 alleles?
An allele is simply an alternate form of a gene. It is possible to have a number of variations for the same gene sequence, hence the term multiple alleles. In cases of multiple alleles, there is usually a dominance hierarchy or relational schematic that demonstrates which of every possible pair of alleles will be preferentially expressed.
What is bioprospecting?
Bioprospecting involves the search for possible new plant or microbial strains, particularly from the world's largest rainforests and coral reefs. These organisms are then used to develop new phytopharmaceuticals. There is some controversy as to who owns the resources of these countries. The countries in which the resources reside or the company that turns them into valuable products.
What is a pseudogene?
As genes are copied and transposed, mutations may occur that make the copies non-functional. This is thought to be the origin of pseudogenes, which resemble actual genes but which, while stable, do not produce a polypeptide.
Can human cells grow outside the body?
Human cells can be cultured in vitro, a Latin term meaning outside the body. If the cells are given oxygen and appropriate nutrients. However, these cells usually pass through a limited number of cell divisions, about 50, before they begin to die.
Which club moss is threatened with extinction?
Many club mosses are attractive plants often used as Christmas decorations or in floral wreaths. The species Lycopodium nutans, which is native to Hawaii and is commonly known as Verweioie, is threatened with extinction and has been placed on the endangered species list.
What is limnology?
Limnology is the study of freshwater ecosystems, especially lakes, ponds, and streams. These ecosystems are more fragile than marine environments since they are subject to greater extremes in temperature. The study of limnology includes the chemistry, physics, and biology of these bodies of water. F. A. Farrell, 1848 to 1931, a Swiss professor, has been called the father of limnology.
How did the search for cinnamon lead to the discovery of North and South America?
Christopher Columbus, 1451 to 1506, was one of many explorers trying to find a direct sea route to Asia, which during the 15th century was thought to be rich with spices. Cinnamon and other spices were so valued in Columbus's era that a new direct route to Asia would have brought untold wealth to the discoverer and his country.
What are the differences between non-residue producing antibacterials and residue producing antibacterials?
Non-residue producing antibacterials quickly destroy bacteria, rapidly disappear from the surface. They were applied due to evaporation or chemical breakdown, and leave no active residue behind. Examples of non-residue producing antibacterials are alcohols, aldehydes, gaseous substances such as formaldehyde, and halogen-releasing compounds such as chlorine and peroxides. In contrast, the disinfecting action of residue-producing antibacterials is prolonged, because they leave long-acting residues on the surfaces to which they are applied. Examples of residue-producing antibacterials are unalides such as trichlocarbon, bisphenols such as triclosan, heavy metal compounds such as silver and mercury, and quaternary ammonium compounds such as benzalkonium chloride.
What is the Oparin-Haldane hypothesis?
In the 1920s, while working independently, Alexandre Oparin, 1894 to 1980, and John Haldane, 1892 to 1964, both proposed scenarios for the prebiotic conditions on Earth. The conditions that would have allowed organic life to evolve. Although they differed on details, both models described an early Earth with an atmosphere containing ammonia and water vapor. Both also surmised that the assemblage of organic molecules began in the atmosphere and then moved into the seas. The steps of the Oparin-Haldane model are described below. 1. Organic molecules including amino acids and nucleotides are synthesized abiotically, without living cells. 2. Organic building blocks in the prebiotic soup are assembled into polymers of proteins and nucleic acids. 3. Biological polymers are assembled into a self-replicating organism that fed on the existing organic molecules.
What are some commercial uses of plant hormones?
Plant hormones are used in a variety of applications to control some aspect of plant development. Auxins are used in commercial herbicides as weed killers. Another use of auxins is to stimulate root formation. It is often referred to as the rooting hormone and applied to cuttings prior to planting. Some hormones are used to increase fruit production and prevent pre-harvest fruit drop. Gibberellins are sprayed on Thompson seedless grapes during the flowering stage to thin the flowers on each cluster, thus allowing the remaining flowers to spread out and develop larger fruit. Gibberellins are also used to enhance germination and stimulate the early emergence of seedlings in grapes. Citrus fruits, apples, peaches, and cherries. When used on cucumber plants, gibberellins promote the formation of male flowers, which is useful in the production of hybrid seeds.
What is the relationship between probability and genetics?
Probability is a branch of mathematics used to predict the likelihood of an event occurring. It is also an important tool for understanding inheritance patterns of specific traits. There are two rules that are applied to genetic inheritance. 1. The rule of 388 multiplication is used when determining the probability of any two events happening simultaneously. For example, if the probability of having dimples is 1/4, and the probability of having a male child is 1/2, then the probability of having a boy with dimples is 1/4 x 1/2, or 1/8. 2. The rule of addition is used when determining the outcome of an event that can occur in two or more ways. For example, if we were to consider the probability of having a male child or of having a child with dimples, then the probability would be 1/2 plus 1/4, or 3/4. In other words, chances are 3 out of 4 that a given birth will produce a male child or a child with dimples.
How did Lysenko affect genetics in the Soviet Union?
Trofim Lysenko, 1889 to 1976, was a dominant force in biology and agriculture in the Soviet Union from 1937 to 1964. Lysenko was a follower of Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, 1744 to 1829, who believed that environmental experiences could change genetic inheritance. Lysenko sought to manipulate the environment in the hopes that this would increase agricultural productivity. By the time Lysenko had fallen out of favor, Soviet agricultural productivity had, in fact, actually decreased significantly, failing to keep pace with the advances of other developed countries.
Which is more common, endomycorrhiza or ectomycorrhiza?
Both endomycorrhiza and ectomycorrhiza have the ability to be mycorrhizal fungi. In endomycorrhiza, the hyphae of the fungus penetrate the outer cells of the plant root and extend into the surrounding soil. In ectomycorrhiza, the hyphae surround but do not penetrate the roots. Endomycorrhiza are much more common than ectomycorrhiza. The fungal component of endomycorrhiza is a zygomycete. While only about 30 species of zygomycetes are known to be involved in endomycorrhizal relationships, the zygomycetes are associated with more than 200,000 species of plants. Basidiomycetes are the most common fungal component of ectomycorrhiza. Although some ascomycetes also form ectomycorrhizal relationships, more species of fungi are involved in ectomycorrhiza, at least 5,000. But most are only associated with a single species of plant. Furthermore, the total number of plants involved in ectomycorrhiza is limited to a few thousand.
What is meant by ecoterrorism?
Ecoterrorism is the term used to describe actions taken by individuals or organizations to prevent what may loosely be termed as environmental change. This change may be seen as the clear-cutting of forests for wood products or land for housing, or the use of genetically modified plants or animals for human consumption. Eco-terrorists are those who are willing to take violent and potentially harmful action in order to prevent these types of changes. Beginning in the 1980s, industrial sabotage such as tree spiking, the process of inserting metal spikes into trees so that they cannot be cut down by chainsaws, was used to prevent logging. However, tree spiking can seriously injure the loggers who are cutting down such trees. Eco-terrorists have also used arson as a tactic. In 1998, eco-terrorists burned down a major portion of a new ski resort in Colorado, which resulted in $12 million in damages.
What are nonspecific defenses?
Nonspecific defenses do not differentiate between various invaders. Barriers such as skin, hide, and the mucous membrane lining the respiratory and digestive tracts, phagocytic white blood cells, and chemicals are nonspecific defenses. The nonspecific defenses are the first to respond to a foreign substance in the body.
What are multifactorial traits?
Phenotypes that are the result of one or more environmental factors and at least two genes are called multifactorial traits. This designation reflects the many factors that may have a role in the physical manifestation of a gene sequence. There are many illnesses that are multifactorial, an example is favism, an inborn metabolic disorder with a predisposition to anemia. However, the anemia only develops when fava beans are eaten or the pollen is inhaled. The environmental factor.
What is centrifugation?
Centrifugation is the separation of immiscible liquids or solids from liquids by applying centrifugal force. Since the centrifugal force can be very great, it speeds the process of separating these liquids instead of relying on gravity.
Can animals commit murder?
If murder is defined as the killing of members of the same species, then some species do indeed commit murder. This could be the result of an altercation to determine dominance within the group or a battle over a resource like food or a mate. Animals, including lions and langur monkeys, have also been known to commit infanticide, death killing of infants. In these cases, infanticide has been linked to the arrival of a new alpha male in the group. Scientists surmise that by killing the infants in the group, who were fathered by some other male, the new alpha can bring their mothers into sexual receptivity faster and thus ensure a chance for reproductive success.
What is the name of the bird that perches on the black rhinoceros's back?
The bird, a relative of the starling, is called an oxpecker, a member of the Sternidae family. Found only in Africa, the yellow-billed oxpecker, Buphagus africanus wingspan, is widespread over much of western and central Africa, while the red-billed oxpecker, Buphagus erythraencus wingspan, lives in eastern Africa from the Red Sea to Natal. 7 to 8 in, 17 to 20 centimeters, long with a coffee brown body. The oxpecker feeds on more than 20 species of ticks that live in the hide of the black rhinoceros. Diceros bicornis, also called the hook-lipped rhino. The bird spends most of its time on the rhinoceros or on other animals, such as the antelope, zebra, giraffe, or buffalo. The bird has even been known to roost on the body of its host. The relationship between the oxpecker and the rhinoceros is called mutualism. The bird feeds on the rhinoceros's ticks, benefiting both the bird and the rhinoceros. In addition, the oxpecker, having much better eyesight than the nearsighted rhinoceros, alerts its host with its shrill cries and flight when danger approaches.
What accounts for the different colors of bird feathers?
The vivid color of feathers is of two kinds, 1, pigmentary, and 2, structural. red, orange and yellow feathers are colored by pigments called lipochromes deposited in the feather barbules as they are formed. Black, brown, and gray colors are from another pigment, melanin. Blue feathers depend not on pigment but on scattering of shorter wavelengths of light by particles within the feather. These are structural feathers. Green colors are almost always a combination of yellow pigment and blue feather structure. Another kind of structural color is the beautiful iridescent color of many birds, which ranges from red, orange, copper, and gold to green, blue, and violet. Iridescent color is based on interference that causes light waves to reinforce, weaken, or eliminate each other. Iridescent colors may change with the angle of view.
What is respiration?
Respiration is the exchange of gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide, between an animal and its environment. There are three phases to the process of respiration: gas exchange 1, breathing. When an animal inhales oxygen and exhales carbon dioxide. 2, transport of gases via the blood circulatory system, to the body's tissues, and 3, at the cellular level. When the cells take in oxygen from the blood and in return add carbon dioxide to the blood.
What club moss is called the resurrection plant?
Selaginella lepidophylla, found in the deserts of the southwestern United States and 170 Mexico. Is called the resurrection plant because of its ability to defy severe drought conditions. During periods of drought, this plant forms a tight, dried-up ball. When rain comes, its branches expand, become green, and carry out photosynthesis.
How do substances move in and out of cells?
Cells constantly transport substances across their cell membranes. Endocytosis, from the Greek endo, meaning in, and cytosis, meaning cell, is the process by which cells bring molecules into their structure. Exocytosis, from the Greek exo, meaning out, and cytosis, is the process by which cells transport materials out of their structure, across their own cell membrane. There are two different types of endocytosis: pinocytosis, from the Greek pino, meaning to drink, and cytosis, and phagocytosis, from the Greek phago, meaning to eat, and cytosis.
What organism has the smallest cellular genome?
The microorganism Mycoplasma genitalium has the smallest known cellular genome. consisting of 580,070 base pairs. A base pair is a couple of hydrogen bonded nitrogenous bases, one purine and one pyrimidine, that join the component strands of the DNA double helix. By comparison, Escherichia coli has 4,639,221 base pairs.
How do steroid hormones differ from non-steroid hormones?
Steroid hormones such as estrogen and testosterone enter target cells and directly interact with the DNA in the nucleus. Non-steroid hormones such as adrenaline generally do not enter the target cell but instead bind to a receptor protein found on external cell membranes. This then causes a sequence of metabolic effects.
What is a VNTR?
VNTR refers to variable number of tandem repeats, which is a kind of molecular marker that contains sequences of DNA that have end-to-end repeats of different short DNA sequences. When the repeating unit is 2 to 4 base pairs long, it is called an STR, short tandem repeat. And when the repeating unit is 2 to 30 base pairs long, it is called a VNTR. An example of a VNTR is GAT, which is 4 tandem repeats of the sequence GGAT. In addition, VNTRs are highly variable regions, and thus there may be many alleles. Gene variations, at many loci, physical location of a gene on a chromosome. VNTRs were discovered by Alec Jeffreys, 1950. And colleagues as they were working on the basics of DNA fingerprinting.
What is the function of the nucleolus?
The nucleolus is a large, spherical structure present in the nucleus of a eukaryotic cell. It is the site where ribosome subunits are assembled, and where both ribosomal RNA synthesis and processing occur.
What is Gattaca?
The 1997 film Gattaca was one of the first movies to examine the idea that one's station in life is dependent on the perfection of one's genes. The movie explores genetic discrimination and previews the bioethics of using genetic information as a means of identification.
What is ultrasound?
Ultrasound is another type of 3D computerized imaging. Using brief pulses of ultra-high frequency acoustic waves, lasting 0.01 second, it can produce a sonar map of the imaged object. The technique is similar to the echolocation used by bats, whales, and dolphins.
What is the purpose of stomata?
Stomata, singular stoma from the Greek term stoma, meaning mouth, are specialized pores in the leaves and sometimes in the green portions of the stems as well as flowers and fruits. Carbon dioxide, CO2, enters the plant through the stomata, while water vapor escapes through the same pores. The guard cells that border the stomata expand and contract to control the passage of water. Carbon dioxide, CO2, and oxygen, O2.
What are truffles and where do they come from?
Truffles, a delight of gourmets, are arguably the most prized edible fungi. Found mainly in Western Europe. They grow near the roots of trees, particularly oak, but also chestnut, hazel, and beech, in open woodlands. Unlike typical mushrooms, truffles develop 3 to 12 in 7.6 to 30.5 centimeters, underground, making them difficult to find. Truffle hunters use dogs and pigs that have been specially trained to find the flavorful morsels. Both animals have a keen sense of smell and are attracted to the strong, nut-like aroma of truffles. In fact, trained pigs are able to pick up the scent of a truffle from 20 feet 6.1 meters away. After catching a whiff of a truffle scent, the animals rush to the origin of the aroma and quickly root out the precious prize. Once the truffle is found, the truffle hunter, referred to in French as a trufficulteur, carefully scrapes back the earth to reveal the fungus. Truffles should not be touched by human skin, as doing so can cause the fungus to rot.